So, on the topic of hero selection, we've had some queries on that matter. A few things to consider is you have the basic this here you have the basic troop type counter where one receives 20% less damage from the other and so on. You can see it up top here. And of course, you can see the lineup and the lineup bonuses. Ideally, you have all 5 heroes of the same type, which gives the biggest bonus. You could have 4 heroes, which gives slightly less bonus. You could do a 3x2, a 3 and 2 that gives you 10%. And only 3 gives you the smallest bonus. Now, when it comes to choosing heroes, especially when it comes to choosing purple heroes or asking, well, should I replace hero X with hero Y? The thing to note is that these raw stats outlined down here aren't the only thing you should consider. You should also consider the skills. Like most DPS heroes come with energy damage, and not a lot of heroes have energy damage counters. Like for instance, you have Murphy. He's one of the strongest tanks. He boosts physical damage reduction for the front row heroes, and his passive skill just reduces all damage taken for front row units. So his active skill reduces physical damage, and this skill reduces everything. For instance, same goes for Diva. Her basic attack and skill do energy damage, so if she goes up against, say, a Williams that provides a flat buff in defense or damage taken, or for instance, Lucius, he offers energy protection, reducing energy damage the hero takes. She'll do less. So basically, it's really important to distinguish the two. One is energy and the other is physical. The second thing to note here is that a lot of these purple heroes, like for instance, let's say Violet, if you read her skill, so that's her passive skill, if you read it, it says that it reduces this hero's damage taken from monsters by a percentage in battle. So you will either have from monsters or you will have monsters. I think he has monsters as well. Yeah. So it'll either say by monsters or sometimes by zombies. But I'm not really finding the zombies one. I knew there was one, but I'm not finding it right now. The thing to note here is by monsters, that usually means world monsters. Like, for instance, you'll put Mason in your first squad when you're hitting code if you don't have him in your first squad and stuff like that. That does not include PvP. So, back row heroes tank. So, back row tank heroes damage versus monsters is boosted by 15% plus all of the stars below. So you will do more damage against monsters, but you will not do more damage in PvP because you're not facing monsters. Although we like to think of them as monsters, you are facing other heroes. Something to consider, something to live by. For instance, another good example here is Carly. Like, she has a debuff. Her debuff is that she attacks everyone doing physical damage, not particularly strong, but she reduces the target's energy damage by a percentage. So that's a useful thing to counter heavy energy damage dealers. Heavy energy damage dealers like this here fella and like her and stuff like that. So it's basically you have your rock paper scissors from the troop type counters, and then you have an additional layer of rock paper scissors from the damage types. Also, an important thing to keep in mind is that SSR skills are usually weaker. Like, for instance, if we look here, a 4-star Mason will give 10% HP attack and defense, while a 4-star Murphy will give 20% HP attack and defense, and cooldown and skill cooldown will go down by 10%. So, using purple heroes is not bad if you know what you're using them for, and if you really don't have a better choice. Like, for instance, I personally like to use Scarlet if I can, because her passive skill is to boost her defense by 70%. Now, unfortunately, that's only for her and not for anyone else, but it's a useful thing to have. While on the other hand, her active skill is to reduce damage again from monsters. So this is something to consider. You have to be aware of the types of damage your heroes do. You have to be aware of the types of damage enemy heroes do, and you have to act accordingly. For instance, I leveled up Raider on my Murphy and Williams because they offer energy damage resistance. I'll also be leveling up the chips because they offer resistance to all damage types, which means both energy and physical. That's also a key thing to note when looking to build gear, like on what to focus on, what to prioritize. If you're facing folks who do a lot of physical damage, Murphy will be your best bet, and upgrading his armor is gonna do you good. Most of the time, you'll be facing folks who do a lot of energy damage. The one exception, so you'll likely be up against Statman and you'll likely be up against Kimberly, and they do mostly energy damage. On the other hand, Morris, the new DPS hero for the Copter team, deals mostly physical. So, so it's really like it's an interesting thing to choose from, and based on that, like you'll have to at some point you'll end up having to adapt several combinations of heroes uh, to ensure that you're not too countered in this here troop type section. And you'll also, of course, have to adapt which heroes you're gonna pick and which heroes are you gonna pair with whom. That's pretty much it.